What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today we've got the, well, at least for the moment, final two members of the Airstrike Patrol that we need to be having a little bit of a look at. They're Micromasters. They're small. We'll start off with Raider Tailwind. Now, Raider Tailwind is a 5-star character. All the Micromasters are 4 or 5. And the stats here are fine. Health of 8, attack of 3, defense of 1. It's fine. It's beefier than we see from some of the other Micromasters, so that's alright by me. What is interesting, though, is that it's got a skill that we generally tend to see from, well, essentially one of each faction of the Micromasters. In bot mode, you have +1 attack and +1 defense for each Airstrike Patrol in your KO area. So stop me if you've heard this one before, but there are 4 of them, which means that at the most you can get +3 attack, +3 defense, which will put you at an attack of 6, which is pretty gosh darn good, phenomenal for a 5 cost, and a defense of 4, which is pretty gosh darn good, but phenomenal for a 5 cost. So that's rather nice. Now, if you're wondering, of course, like we generally tend to see with these Micromasters, there are 2 4 cost and 2 5 cost, putting us at 18 stars in total, which leaves us 7 stars to play with. Maybe you go for a smaller character and some star battle cards. Maybe you go for a moderate, 7 stars isn't huge, but maybe you go for a moderately large character and roll along in that regard. Either way, we've got some stars to play with. Now, in alt mode, you've got stealth while untapped. One important thing you need to think about when doing something like this: all 4 of the Airstrike Patrol have stealth while untapped. And if everyone has stealth, then nobody has stealth. So one of 2 things is going to happen. You add a 5th character who also has stealth, and your opponent has a free choice of who to hit if they're all untapped. Or you put a character in that doesn't have stealth, and then if all your characters are untapped, i.e. if your opponent's going first, they are essentially forced into attacking one particular character. So, something to bear in mind. Do please bear that in mind. But there is something else going on in alt mode here. When one of your Airstrike Patrol battles, and you flip at least 1 green icon, it gets +2 attack and +1 defense until end of battle. Now this is really nice. This is awesome. Because of course, it's any of your Airstrike Patrol. So what you really do with Tailwind, and this one kind of writes itself, you leave it in alt mode to make sure that you've got stealth, so you're protected and your opponent can't go after it. And every one of your Airstrike Patrol, when they attack, hopefully you're playing enough green icons that you will flip some. And one thing that is cool here, a lot of cards are both green and blue, or green and orange, so you can actually play an orange attacking deck with loads of green icons, which is awesome. It'll limit your card choice, as it always does when you're going for a particular kind of icon, but still, nice option. And then when the rest of your Airstrike have gone down, that's when you bring Tailwind into bot mode and start smashing with a 6 attack, 4 defense character. Very, very nice indeed. Now there is one other of the Airstrike Patrol that has been revealed fairly recently, and it is Raider Nightflight. Now this is a 4 cost, so we expect slightly lower stats, and we have slightly lower stats. Health of 7 is 1 lower. Attack of 3 is higher, and to be fair, right, if we're sitting here rocking attack of 3, incidentally Vista and Stormcloud both have attack of 3, we're expecting attack of 4 on an 8-star character. So if we're chucking out 4 and 5-star characters with attack of 3, that's really quite nice. Compared to most Micromasters, these guys have got a bit of beef when it comes to hitting. Although their defense is not good. And again, Nightflight's got 1 and 0. Now in alt mode, once again, it's got stealth while untapped, so let's not worry about that too much. We've talked about that. But in bot mode, it's got a tap skill. You have to scrap 3 green icon cards from your hand. That's a lot, ladies and gentlemen. That's a lot. You're scrapping 3 cards from your hand. That could end up with no cards in hand. But your opponent chooses one of their characters and does 3 damage to it. If your 3 scrapped cards have the same name, repair 3 damage from one of your characters. Now, on the one hand, the repairing here seems really nice, especially in the context of these characters are really weak and easily KO'd. However, we're also in a slightly awkward situation here in that your characters are really easily KO'd, and you do potentially run into the situation where you just don't have any options here, unfortunately. Like, you're just getting 1-hit KO'd straight away. So, yeah. If your opponent's just 1-hit KOing all your weak bots, the repairing is going to be irrelevant. And also, your opponent chooses one of their characters and does 3 damage to it. So they get the choice here. They can essentially scupper you by putting the damage on the character where it's going to be most beneficial for them. Or, I suppose to phrase it slightly differently, least unbeneficial? We'll go there. Now, what is very strange is that all of these tap skills are generally based on existing battle cards that have the same icon as the colour you need to scrap to use it. That is not the case with Raid and Nightflight, so this would probably be a good time to introduce you to the brand new card, War of Attrition. It's got a blue and a green icon. It is an action card, and it reads, your opponent chooses one of their characters and does 1 damage to it. If this is the 3rd War of Attrition you've played this turn, repair 3 damage from one of your characters. You may play another War of Attrition. Now, not entirely sure how I feel about this. Now, on the one hand, I love that you can play 3 in a row. We've seen this with a bunch of green icon cards. We've seen it with Focus Fire. We've seen it with Sonic Scramble. So that's kind of cool. But there comes a point where how many cards have you actually got in hand? Like, we got tap skills that are asking us to discard 3 cards from our hand. We've got action cards where you can play 3 at a time. Well, we're starting to get to the stage here where we might legitimately just not have any cards in our hand, and that's going to be a bit of an issue. So if you want to play these kind of decks, if you want to play the Airstrike Patrol, you're going to have to go for some draw power. And I actually really like System Reboot with these characters, purely because now it can help your opponent, but it can also hinder them. But both players scrap their hand and draw 4 cards. But with a deck like this, you might often have a very low hand size, so the scrapping is going to be way less of an issue for you, possibly way more of an issue for your opponent, and then you're drawing 4 cards. Of course, if you're trying to play 3 of the same card at the same time, in the same turn, then there is an issue there, because if you're scrapping your hand, you might be scrapping 1 War of Attrition, guaranteeing that you then cannot play 3 at the same time, because 1 is in your scrap pile. And you will often be stashing them in your hand, because they've got the green icon, meaning at the end of a battle, you can swap that, if you flipped it, for a card in your hand. So maybe instead you go a little bit more boring and you just go something like Pep Talk. It's a straight draw too, but it's a little bit more reliable. Also means you're kind of doubling up on the blue icons here. So I like this effect. I like it on War of Attrition, and I like it on Raid and Nightflight, but just bear in mind that it's, even with the green icons, it's going to be easier to get them in hand. But by the same token, you are going to be struggling a little bit here. I mean, we're breaking faction, but there's even an argument to play Dinobot Snarl here. It is a 7 cost, so it will fit. Because when you flip it into alt mode and you've got no cards in hand, draw 2 cards. Well, if you're going to be continuously sitting there not having cards in hand, then maybe something like this actually turns into really good draw power. I don't know. Something to consider, ladies and gentlemen. Something to consider. Now, as we're talking about the Airstrike Patrol, it would be fairly rude if we did not mention the previous ones that we've seen. Now, yes, if we have a look at Raider Stormcloud, we know he's got stealth in alt mode, blah, blah, blah. It's not interesting at this stage, we've talked about it. The stats are not particularly great, but it is a 4 cost, so it's fine. We love the attack of 3, we hate the defense of 0. But you may tap it and scrap 3 green icon cards from your hand. Gives one of your characters bold 3 until end of turn, but if you scrap 3 cards with the same name, it gives them bold 6. Well, if you're playing an orange version of this deck, and you're starting off with 3 attack, and then you're rocking bold 6, yeah, that's kind of fun in my book, ladies and gentlemen. I'm cool with that. And then we've got Raider Vispa. Again, we got very similar stats here. You do gain 1 extra health, but it's also 1 star more expensive, so we need something for that. Stealth in alt mode, of course it does. And then in bot mode, you tap, scrap 3 green icon cards from your hand. Are you seeing a pattern? Your opponent chooses 3 cards from their hand and scraps them. If the 3 scrapped cards have the same name as each other, draw 3 cards. Now this one I like very much, because as I've said a couple of times, one of my primary concerns with this deck is that you're constantly trying to play triplets, and that's going to get annoying in terms of actually having cards. So being able to scrap 3 cards, but then immediately draw 3 to replenish your hand, I am a big fan of. To sum up with the Airstrike Patrol, you've got to go heavy green icons, like almost exclusively green icons. But we've got green icons that can give you bold. We've got some disruption for your opponent's hand. You've got some repairing. You've got some cheeky damage. There's plenty you can do with green icons at this stage. There are many, 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 many options. And you've got higher attack than we would usually expect from the Micromasters, albeit your defense is extremely low, and you do need to worry about constantly trying to play triplets. It is also worth pointing out that all 4 of these characters are ranged, which means that you can be playing around with stuff like Armed Hovercraft, though it doesn't have a green icon, is good for cheeky damage, and Marksmanship, which again doesn't have a green icon, but is pretty good for cheeky damage. And they are all planes, so you could play around with stuff like Bombing Run. Bombing Run is rather nice. It lets you choose an enemy character and move 1 damage from each of your planes to that enemy. Once again, we've got a blue icon, so if you want to go a little bit more defensive with some blue icons, these will all work nicely, but you don't want to be playing too many cards that don't have green icons. The other really nice plane card we see here is Crash Landing, whereby if one of your planes is KO'd, you do damage equal to its attack total to a tapped enemy. Now, I love this because you've got naturally pretty good attack of 3, and you've got 4 planes who are all going to be going down fairly easily, but it has no battle icons whatsoever. I think I might like Crash Landing more than the other cards I've just mentioned. I think it's phenomenal, but it doesn't have any battle icons, so word of warning, I think is fair to say. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. That's the Airstrike Patrol. That's what I think, but I'd very much like to know what you think. So let me know in the comment section. Go nuts. Be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at the Wossy. That's where we talk about games. And do please consider checking out patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts, etc. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Wossy Plays.